42 hours. That's how long ago we first hit 250 degrees on our Big Joe, and it's still going. Oh, this is never gonna end. Oh my goodness, it doesn't even look like I've burnt through hardly anything. Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today I'm answering one of the questions that you guys ask me the most, which is just how long will the Joe Jr. or the Big Joe run on a single load of charcoal? I've been dying to do this test. So I've already gone ahead and cleaned out both Joes. So we're looking at an empty basket in the Joe Jr. as well as the Big Joe. And if you're new to the channel and never heard me talk about the basket for the Joe Jr., this is not included. And so I went ahead and got one from a company named Kick-Ash Basket. It is my favorite accessory for the Joe Jr. because in a small portable size, you can take it out and cool off your ceramics. If you leave that heat source in there, it takes much, much longer. And so I just think it's a must-have for the Joe Jr. But I wanted to point out that's the only difference from 100% stock Kamado Joe Jr. and 100% stock Big Joe, which we're going to use for today's experiment. So it is just after noon on Saturday, as I mentioned, and we're going to find out how far into the day, or maybe even tomorrow, we can hold a low and slow indirect cook. I'm going to be aiming as close as possible for about 250 degrees on each of our two grills. And to keep it consistent, since the Big Joe comes with the slow roller accessory, the Joe Jr. doesn't, I'm going to use the ceramic half stones because that's more comparable to the ceramic stone that you get in the Joe Jr. Anyways, let's fill these bad boys up with some charcoal, fire it up, and get this test on the road. All right, welcome to the nighttime. It's just started to rain, so I'm going to make this one pretty quick, or as quick as I can, but I have a lot to fill you in on. So it has been about 8 hours since we last started our Joe Jr. and our Big Joe, and it's been about 6 hours since I've been here taking a look at what's going on. Looking at our data chart, it looks like the Joe Jr. held pretty steady at that 250 range till about 5 p.m., so about 4 hours. And then we took a nosedive down into no man's land in terms of our fire. So we did not run out of charcoal, but it looks like we've sort of burnt to the front sort of center spot of our charcoal basket, and there wasn't enough air to allow the ember to spread to the charcoal at the back. So I think we've probably got about 50% of our charcoal left. And if we were watching this a little bit more closely than leaving it unattended for 6 hours, this wouldn't have happened. But now we got to try and nurse this guy back to life here. I don't think the Joe Jr. is going to make it for our 24-hour goal. It might sort of double what we've done so far, which is about 8 hours. So it maybe will make it 16 hours approximately, based off of what I can see that is left remaining. Our Big Joe, on the other hand, it's running, when I came home, right around 241 degrees. So it's just fallen about 9 degrees below that 250 degree target temperature that we set out. But the line looks incredible. And so I don't think there's any charcoal issues going on. I haven't opened up the Big Joe to even take a look. I'll save that for tomorrow when we can together be a little bit closer and go and see what's inside our Big Joe. Anyways, that's it for this evening's update. I'm just going to see again if we can nurse this guy back to health. There's still lots of heat in the dome, so I think it shouldn't have too hard of a time coming back up to 250 degrees, and I'll rejoin you in the morning. All right, good morning. It is just after 7 in the morning. Got another update for you. So it looks like, looking through our data, that our Joe Jr. continued along pretty well to about 1 in the morning, and then took another nosedive. So that would have given us about 12 hours of being able to hold 250 before we tanked down into almost nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring you closer. We're going to open it up and find out if this is tapping out, if 12 hours is the finish line or not for our Joe Jr. Our Big Joe, looking at the data, it continued pretty great right up to about 6 in the morning, and then we started to see some softening in that curve. So that's going to be giving us about 17 hours or so of 250, and now we're starting to see a bit of a dive. Now, I don't know if this is we're out of charcoal or if it's just, again, it's raining, it's cooled off, it's early in the morning, and it maybe just needs a touch more air. So to find out where we're at, we're gonna go take a closer look inside the Junior, as well as a closer look inside the Big Joe. If the Big Joe still has lots of coal, maybe we just need to stoke the fire a little bit and give it a touch more air to deal with a sudden temperature drop and some rain. We'll go ahead and do that. So let me move the camera a little closer. Our temperature probe says we are sitting at 87, and our dome temperature looks like we're off. So let's go ahead and find out where we are. So we are not out of charcoal, but we've had a fire go out. Doesn't even look bad all on one side. I'm not sure maybe even why that happened. Let's see if we have maybe too much ash underneath. I think that's our problem. Still quite a lot of charcoal. I think might be the problem here. I think we have maybe had too much ash sort of build up for the Joe Junior to get the airflow that it needs. Go ahead and this for the Junior. We have more charcoal and we could keep going, but at this point I don't think it'd be a really fair comparison, since it's had several pauses well below our 250 degree temperature, and I'm not sure that's going to give us an accurate time. So if we relit this, got it back up to 250, and let's say it goes another 6 hours or so, it's really not an uninterrupted 250 degrees. So I think there's definitely enough charcoal there that if it was burning properly, we could have sustained those temperatures overnight. But to be fair, we're going to go ahead and call that the end for our Junior. So we have a frightening amount of charcoal. Oh, this is never gonna end. Oh my goodness, it doesn't even look like I've burnt through hardly anything. Okay. There's no way this is out before dinner. So we started with a full basket, and for the most part, that's still a very full basket. I don't know if you can see in underneath there. That's a lot of charcoal. So let's close it back up and we'll continue on with our Big Joe. So we didn't really need to open that. We just needed to give it a touch more air. I think the rain is the problem, not anything inside where there's not enough charcoal. Get our grate back in, our probe, and we continue on.
It's been 27 and a half hours, and so now dinner is upon us. I actually need the grill, so I think it's going to be okay. So to not interrupt our continuing test, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the probe and the deflector plates and install my 2 cast iron reversible grids and make about an 18-inch flat cast iron top surface. I'm just going to give that as much time without changing the vent setting, so hopefully it'll continue on about 250 degrees, and that's exactly, we're 247, so we're right around that 250 degree range, and that will allow the cast iron to heat up without using any more of our charcoal. And then maybe for 10-15 minutes, I'll give it just a bit more air, heat up, come back down, and install everything. I don't think this will hurt too much our total test, but I wasn't expecting 27 and a half hours, and when we looked in this morning, for the charcoal basket to look like we haven't even used anything yet. So already my expectations are well into the night or tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we see Tuesday. I don't know. That would be crazy. Okay, so while it is good to see that we have made some progress and there is definitely a finish line in sight, I already know from my video where I tried running the Big Joe on the amount of fuel from the Kamado Joe Jr. that anything around the size of the basket of the Joe Jr. is good for at least 6 hours. And I think that's about what we have in there. Plus, we're already at 250, so we're not going to use any of that extra energy to get up to 250. So in English, all of that I think means we're adding a minimum another 6 hours on top of this cook. So that'll bring us up into about the 54-hour range before I think we finally, even if we open the vents all the way, will no longer be able to sustain the stable temperatures. So that's my guess. We'll see if we're right and if the weather cooperates, but I'll rejoin you as we get a little bit close to the finish line, which we know is coming up today at some point. I'm pretty sure. One can hope. All right, that is it. We have made it to the finish line. 56 hours after we got started filling up our Kamado Joe Big Joe 3 with some Jealous Devil charcoal. It is no longer able to maintain temperatures. And so I'm gonna go ahead and call this right at the 9 p.m. mark. It's almost 10 o'clock right now, but starting at 9, I saw the temperature starting to come down. Gave it a little bit more air on the bottom, more air on the top, to the point where we're wide open on the bottom, wide open on the top, and our curve is still continuing to decline. So I'll bring you a little bit closer. We'll take a look together at what's going on inside. But I think we have finally given up the good fight. And what a fight that has been. 56 hours on not an overfilled, overflowing basket of charcoal, just a normal basket of charcoal full with our Jealous Devil charcoal ran for 56 hours. That just boggles my mind, but I'm so happy that, you know, I have this information now, because I see this picture all the time, you know, on Facebook, Instagram, questions that you guys ask in the comment, where I see, you know, the basket just loaded to the top, exactly what we have here, to know that that's 56 hours worth of fuel. And so there's a couple of things that we already knew and a couple of new things that we already know that I want to just again re-emphasize with why we don't want to do that. So for the first one, why don't we want to, you know, use that much charcoal? Again, I'll refer you to a video that I did before in terms of used charcoal and how it performs. Not only is it a little bit harder to set up our grill if we want to put smoking wood underneath or use a half basket configuration, it's just that much more unwieldy to, you know, manage and get set up. It also, you know, doesn't perform the same in terms of lighting as well as BTU potential. So if you're curious to find out all the details behind that, again, link is down below, you know, for you. Some new information, because I don't normally cook with a basket full for, you know, 2-3 days worth of, you know, cooking, is just how much more difficult this was to control for temperatures than a smaller amount of charcoal. And so when we've got a lot of fuel just sitting there, it just wants to go all the time. And so I was really having to be more aggressive, you know, with the vent settings than I normally would. But then, you know, since we have so much fuel, if it started to ash up or burn in an unusual way, it would nosedive far more aggressively than what I ever see in any of my low, slow cooks. That just doesn't happen, you know, if you do a brisket overnight or a pork shoulder or something like that overnight. And so, you know, I really just want to, again, re-emphasize that with you guys, that if you're new to smoking, it's actually far more difficult to try and keep this massive amount of fuel from not just, you know, exploding and getting runaway temperatures, or snuffing out and nosediving. And so you can make life a lot easier if you're trying to dial in your smoker and get it to run at those flat line temperatures, steady eddy, over the night or the day or whatever you're doing, where you don't want to be sitting here and having to babysit it and micromanage it. So way less fuel, much easier to manage, much easier in terms of controlling the fire, in terms of how it burns and which direction it goes, as well as helping make sure that your temperatures, you know, don't run much higher or much lower than what you want. Anyways, it's been a real pleasure to hang out with you over the past couple days
And if there's another video that you would like to see me do, by all means, please go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I always read those, respond to them, and again, if many of you are asking for the same thing, it shows up in a video like this. So go ahead and let me know what you'd like to see next. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button to catch future videos. Until then, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, signing off.